Okay, so this is my entry for the press conference. I'll be answering these questions posed to you guys, or posed from you guys as Vygotsky. So I'll get right into it. So the first question is, what led to your interest in education, and why did you want to pursue a career in this field? So I did not actually have any interest in education, essentially. My studies just happened to kind of intertwine with it. Um, so I was more focused on language acquisition and interaction, and we see a lot of that in schools, obviously, where there's a large amount of interaction of groups of people um, between adults or children or both. So the second question is, did your childhood/early life have an effect on the change in education that you made? I wouldn't say so. Um, Actually, in fact, I was into medicine and law before I got into psychology. I studied law in college, and I wanted to go for medicine before I pursued my degree in law. Um, the only thing, I mean, my mom wanted to be a teacher when I was growing up. However, she didn't end up doing that just so that she could raise my sisters and I. So I don't really think that has much of an effect on what contributions that I made for education in the long run. Um, the third question is, how do you think children learn best? So I'll always say that children learn best in social situations. Anything where they can direct each other and be directed by more knowledgeable adults. Um, so I think that they learn a lot better just communicating back and forth with each other, their peers, and their adults. Um, and I kind of touch on this in psychology of art, and I also touch on this in the cultural historical development theory, just where people learn best within their own societies and together as people. The next question is, do you identify as a holist, linearist, laissez-fairist, or a critical theorist? Definitely 100% holist. Um, Children are, like I said before, children are best learning together in social situations, um, and they definitely learn best um, being guided by more experienced adults as well. And I wrote about this in educational psychology as well, where it's just about how children are often learning their best when they are collaborating with their peers or with more knowledgeable adults. The next one is, what theorist had the greatest influence on you? Definitely George Hegel, who also believed that individuals are better off learning within their society and with their peers and more knowledgeable adults, and that they learn through interaction and collaboration within their society. He believed a lot that we should not be isolated beings and that we should be together with each other learning, since that's the best way to go. The sixth question is, would you agree with dominant educational practices today? And I'm going to assume that means kind of towards linearism, which I'm going to go with no. Because as I've kind of mentioned, we learn best together, communicating with each other and being social with each other and interacting with each other. And also, I don't like standardized testing. I think the best way to test children is to surely given a test where essentially a child is examined on how they perform tasks with more knowledgeable adults and without more knowledgeable adults, so by themselves, and then just gauge how they can problem solve in both situations. The next question is, what was your most important contribution to the field of education? I think people would probably say social cultural theory, which is essentially just how people are influenced by one another and influenced by culture and influenced by social interaction. Um, and it's kind of fitting because language and social interaction and communication is what I love to study and what I most frequently studied. So it's definitely fitting that that is probably my most important contribution to education. Um, the eighth question here is, what was the hardest part of your research? And I don't know if I can answer that necessarily. I don't think I had a hardship with my actual research, but my diagnosis with tuberculosis definitely did not help anything, because I did have a relapse in the 1920s, and I struggled with complications with that through my career, and also just the ruling of Stalin and him making it so hard to communicate with people outside of our area. So number 9 is, did you receive a lot of criticism for your work? If so, what were the critiques of your work? How would you respond to them? So definitely the biggest criticism to my work is that it's not dependent on gender, and it's not attending to the differences of gender. And we're not seeing any outcomes affected by gender, and a lot of people are curious on how some of these things would be affected by gender. And so I would say that I still believe that every child is going through the same process at the beginning. We're all exploring, we're all asking questions, we're all processing the world around us. So I wanted my work to be as general as possible. Even though every child cannot fit within every guideline that I set, every child asks questions, needs help, develops language, learns to think on their own, needs adults to help them at some point. So I think that my work being so general kind of goes around that need for a specific gender, and the fluctuation with how gender would affect my work. The second to last question is, what is your favorite piece of writing that you published? Why is this your favorite? So I kind of narrowed it down to 2. Number 1 being Thought and Language, and the other being Art of Psychology. I loved Thought and Language just because of the fact that I love studying the way people process things, the way people develop, the way people use language. So that was a lot of fun to write. And I also like Art of Psychology because I personally love art, and it really let me express my love for art and literature as well. And then the last question is, for me anyways, how do you feel that being a man influenced your work, and would your work have been different if you were a woman? Personally, I don't believe so. I didn't have any studies where I was sort of swayed one way or another, or I didn't have any bias towards studying boys or girls. And I'm already kind of breaking some sort of gender rule where I have a love for art and literature. So I don't feel that being a man influenced my work, and I think that everything that I have done is as general and unbiased as I could be. So with that being said, those are the questions that you guys posed to me. If there's any further questions that you'd like to ask, please let me know. Have a good one.